Somewhere out in cyberspace, they're filling in the human race on cloud computing's latest tech or the history of the internet. What will they cover this time? I hope it's robots or AI. Their agile minds crunch the data fast to bring you the Clearly Cloud podcast.
Hello, and welcome to another Clearly Cloud podcast, episode 3. Are you as surprised as I am that we made it this far, Conrad?
I'm surprised every single time. No, I'm not surprised. I think we're, just getting started. I'm enjoying it.
Yes, me too. We're meeting some really interesting people behind the scenes. I'm getting to talk to some cool people. Some cool people are also ignoring me as I'm trying to get guests, but this has been great.
People ignore you all the time. I think you really just like doing this because you like to play with what is it called?
Smart people?
Well, okay. No, I mean, you like to play with Adobe and cut things, splice them, put it together. It's another one of things.
You don't always make my editing easy. But yeah, I really do like to play with media. And somebody else who likes to play with technology is our guest today, James Benham, who is the founder of JB Knowledge, and he makes software for the construction and insurance industries.
No, that's not what he does. What he does is he makes me realize that I haven't achieved enough in my life.
Oh my God. Flying dogs around the country? Like, really? This was a great
Flying dogs? I mean, for goodness sake, he was a councilman, all the things that he did. What I really love talking to him about is just how far back nerdy he is, just like you and I. I mean, that's why we even started this podcast in the first place.
Yep. Yeah, we did take a trip down memory lane.
It always reminds me when I talk to other people like that of back in the day when we were trying to put together a computer and make it work. And it was so difficult, but we loved every minute of it. And now it's like those basic things are so easy, but now there's so much available. It's so fun. It's like, I love all the cloud things,
Yep, absolutely. But it is a great session with him today. And yeah, we really geek out. What I was most surprised about was the crux of the question is I asked him, what do you think was the most impactful technology over his career working in construction technology? And you're just going to have to listen to the interview to find out. No, but let's get on to the news.
5, 4, 3, 2, bringing you some news.
This week, not the biggest news week, but something big did happen. The Surface Duo got leaked a few hours early. And so the internet went nuts that, hey, the Surface Duo is coming out. So it's going to be coming out on September 10th. And it's going to cost $13.99 for the 128 gigabyte and $14.99 for the 256 gigabyte, which is about what the other folding devices are.
I thought you said we weren't doing advertisements.
We're not doing advertisements. We're making a wish list. I want you to know how much to save to buy me one, Conrad.
Dang it. And now I know your plot is terrible. No, that thing looks pretty cool. I'll tell you, it looks way better than the last time Microsoft tried to create a phone with Windows Mobile.
Oh, yeah. Nokia. Rest in peace.
I mean, I was saying Windows Mobile, but I wouldn't say I loved it. I was at Microsoft at the time, all that was coming out, but it just didn't hit the mark. This one really looks interesting. It's going to be interesting to see how things like remote desktop work on it and other apps work on it. It's like, oh my God, $1,300, $1,400 for a phone. Who would pay such a thing? Lots of people.
Oh, yeah. And I mean, when you consider that
lots of people,
most flagship phones nowadays, like when you get the newest, biggest Apple or iPhone, when you get the newest, biggest Samsung, like your flagship phones are getting that expensive now. I mean, you really they're mini computers.
I wonder if Microsoft's going to lean into this and be kind of funny and like, hey, everybody, please do us a favor. Be COVID responsible. Social distancing. We're going to recommend that people don't stand outside the stores on September 10th waiting for the phones. So nobody's doing it. We know that everybody heard our message.
Yep.
Well, Apple's going to be like, nobody was standing outside for your phone in the first place.
Yeah, I have a feeling that they're going to ship them. But yeah, you can pre-order through AT&T and Best Buy, so maybe there will be lines outside stores. It's just hard to think that, God, we're still going to be here. We're still going to be at home then. But speaking of events and getting into crowded spaces, that did not happen this year with DEF CON, which wrapped up last week. And in last week's podcast, I said I was surprised I hadn't heard about like pacemakers being hacked or any real crazy exploits. And this year there were a few. So Tesla's battery management system was hacked, spark clusters, traffic light systems. But the story that really popped out of tech news and got picked up everywhere else was that pen test partners presented the systems of a Boeing 747-400 and focused on the systems that could be hackable and of interest to hackers. And they described that some of their updates are still performed using floppy disks.
Floppy disks.
3.5-inch floppies.
I'm sorry. It's just a weird part right now in the podcast. I don't know what kind of mood I'm in, but for some reason you said DEF CON 2020, and I was like, a convention for deaf people. Maybe that's. And then you said pen test, and I was like, a bunch of people clicking pens all the time. I know it's terrible. It's like I moved on to bad jokes, but it's kind of computer related. Yeah. No, when I think about people using, so still with floppies, huh? It makes me feel relevant because I know what a floppy is.
Oh yeah. I remember 8-inch floppies. Get off my lawn. And zip drives.
Yeah. You put them in the terminals. Yes.
Yeah. Another thing that came out is Check Point dropped hundreds of vulnerabilities on the Qualcomm Snapdragon chips, estimated to expose over 1 billion devices to attacks. Now, Qualcomm has come out and put out patches for all of this, but in any sort of chip ecosystem, well, now that has to go out to Samsung, then Samsung has to push their patches. So going to be curious to see if any of those start bubbling up over the next year or so. Yep. And then Forbes came out and said that the U.S. shed 134,000 IT jobs in July alone.
Yeah, it's it's crazy. It's like we saw this and we talked about it a couple weeks ago around Indeed when they were saying just the contraction of IT jobs, at least from their perspective, but that there was a growing amount on the developer side. And so, most businesses will have IT shops and, either holding up the old stuff they had or whatever. And so when they go out of business, those go out of business. Other businesses still do that because when they let go of a lot of people, sometimes they don't need as much IT shops. But what they do double down on is the development, because they're going to say, the developers are the creators. And they're like, we need to build something either for this market or the market that's going to come afterward. So, I think this is pretty much predictable.
Right. Now, what's interesting is this report came from CompTIA, and what they noted is that even with July's job losses, net employment in IT has risen by 203,000 positions since the outbreak began. Now, why do you think that is?
People need help with their computers.
Smarty pants. Remote work. Suddenly, everybody has to digitally transform faster than ever.
I keep seeing like different flavors of the same meme and like everywhere. Like what drove or increased your remote work strategy? And there's like 3 bullets on the list: CEO, scratch; CIO, scratch; COVID.
Yep. Yeah. Everything changed.
100%. 100%.
Yeah.
There's somebody out there, some IT person was working on some strategies. Like, we should do remote work. And they're like, why should we do work? Like, what if there was a pandemic? Like, it'll never happen. Like, this person said this in February or like December last year.
Well,
the business goes, what did you do?
Yeah. Well, we have spoken with clients that they're talking to us and they're saying, I planned for disaster response and business continuity. I knew there was going to be something that was going to happen. I thought it'd be an earthquake or a fire, a localized event. I didn't expect everybody around the world to be impacted. So there was a lot of shuffling, but I really am excited about the changes in what's happening with the workforce and where we're going to be when we come out the other side. Now I feel like a newscaster. And in other news. So last week we talked about a little bit about TikTok and being banned in the US. And between the time that we did that and the time the podcast got published, so this is a little bit older news. This happened on Sunday. Bill Gates stepped in and said that the Microsoft TikTok deal is a poison chalice. And what a way with words, a poison chalice. And what he pointed out is that being in the social media business, particularly with such a big player, it's not simple. Now, yeah, operating systems are, right?
I mean, he said that COVID was going to be bad and a lot of people would get sick if we didn't do things. I mean, can you really trust this guy's predictions? Absolutely. He was right there.
He was a lunatic. He was absolutely insane back in the 80s saying there's going to be a computer on every desk.
Oh, goodness. I mean, Bill trying to ruin the TikTok deal. He's just being a player hater. No, I'm kidding. But, it's I don't know. That's the whole TikTok thing. We could do like an hour segment on this whole TikTok thing. But
no. How long? What's the max time for a TikTok video? I think we'd have to do like a 2-minute segment or a 1.5-minute segment. I don't use it, so I can't really make TikTok jokes. But yeah, what Bill Gates pointed out, though, was that look at what had just happened. You had Facebook and Twitter up in Washington, D.C., having to talk about election interference. And yeah, let's just keep making operating systems. Let's do Azure. But I don't know. I think it's a boomer thing. He just doesn't understand TikTok. And it's not his thing. But I like how you said it. He's just a player hater. But don't hate the player, hate the game. Yeah. And speaking of games, yesterday, so when they banned TikTok, another company that was banned at the same time or threatened with sanctions by that executive action was Tencent from China. And Tencent is the parent company of Epic Games, which owns Fortnite. And it's, oh, wow. So like I said, they had to come in and say, no, we're not banning Fortnite. Well, looks like Apple and Google have now banned Fortnite, and they have been removed from their respective Play stores. And what Fortnite did was they dropped the prices of all their in-app purchases by 30%. And they were getting ready for this. And within a few hours, Apple took them off their iOS Play Store. And then a couple hours later, Google did the same thing. They already had a video ready that was mocking the old Apple 1984 video. Yeah, this is just a podcast of throwbacks, huh, Conrad? Remember that commercial? Mm-hmm. Where they throw the hammer through the big video screen? Yeah. They did it in game. And it's a total mockery of that old ad. And now it's playing in the group hub area of Fortnite in constant loop. It's on their Twitter and Facebook pages in constant loop. They are attacking Google and Apple for unfair trade practices. And,
the timing here is delicious because when you look at the three companies that are, really the three big companies that are really involved with this, other little player, the content creator, Apple, Google, and Microsoft, which of these were on trial or whatever with Congress at a hearing, speaking about the power that they have against over content companies?
That's it. That's it.
So when I say the timing is delicious, you would think, and it's funny because Apple and Google collectively did this. One can almost wonder, are they conspiring a little bit?
Well, that was what was interesting is during the House sessions, they said, oh, no, we're even across the board. And then the House dropped thousands of documents. And in those documents, they highlighted the fact that Apple and Amazon were in cahoots in order to lower the pricing for Amazon purchases, not Amazon purchases like buying dressers and stuff, but for the Amazon apps and in-app purchases in the iOS store down from the 30%. And everybody else has to pay 30% of any in-app purchases. And it was a fight, but in the back room, they made a deal. And now Fortnite wants a deal as well. And I'm trying to remember, but I mean, Fortnite made billions of dollars last year. And any of those purchases done on an Android or an app or an iPad, Apple and Google get 30%. So I can see why they'd want to fight. But almost immediately, Epic Games came back and said, we're going to sue, and had this great video. You can check it out on Twitter and Facebook. And that they're trending a hashtag right now, hashtag free Fortnite. I might actually have to play that with Spencer this weekend.
Oh, man. He's going to own you.
Oh, I'm sure. Yep, he is getting really good with the controller, and I'm still that mouse and keyboard guy. All right, well, I think it's time to move on to guests.
4, 3, 2, 1, having some fun with guests.
And today we're joined by James Benham of JB Knowledge and host of the Content Crew podcast. How are you doing today, James?
Outstanding. Really appreciate you guys having me on, and it's a great day to be in business.
Absolutely. And thank you very much for taking the time. I know you're a very busy man. To get started, can you tell us a little bit about who you are and what is JB Knowledge?
Sure. Again, my name is James Benham. I'm a native Louisianian, grew up in Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and lived there from 79 to 97. Grew up in the public school system there in East Baton Rouge Parish, and fortunately got plugged into the gifted and talented program there. So I went to GT Magnet Schools, and they had a really super strong tech focus in the early 90s, believe it or not, in South Louisiana. It's not all Bobby Boucher water boy. Although I have a lot of friends that are the water boy. I have a lot of relatives who are the water boy, but some high quality H2O. But certainly we had a really strong engineering focus. And so as a result, I started writing software when I was 11 in middle school. They started teaching us GW Basic and assembly, that kind of stuff on TRS-80s and the early 286s. And so I really had a lot of fun writing software early on. Got my first computer when I was 12 and started learning how to write batch files on DOS, and just got really super involved in technology. And then this thing called the internet came around. I was on bulletin board systems when I was a kid.
They were the best. Well, at that time. No. I mean, I think that's kind of where a lot of us started off. I think we're kind of all in the same area, bulletin boards, batch files.
Yeah, sure. Like I was on a BBS called the Cajun Clickers. And so it was a bunch of Boudreaux's and Thibodeau's on online, and we would dial in and we would post messages onto a forum, and then people would comment on our messages. Does that sound familiar? Oh, and yeah. then we would send these things called electronic mails to each other. And then we started connecting the different exchanges. So Lafayette, Baton Rouge, New Orleans all had their own BBSs, and we started connecting them. So at night they would dial each other up and they would interchange messages so we could send emails to people in other cities. And we just thought that was so cool, that we could send messages like that. And then this crazy thing called the internet came out. National Science Foundation commercialized the internet. And I was on, the next day building Gopher sites, the predecessor to the web. Oh, yeah. And had a lot of fun doing that and writing Pascal and Fortran, assembly, C, QBasic, that kind of stuff code back in the mid 90s. And then we got a really high speed dial-up connection. I went to a high school just for engineers. So my whole high school was for high school students that wanted to be engineers. And so they brought a T1 connection from Southern University, and we started an ISP back when like the only options were AOL and CompuServe. And so we started an ISP for all the teachers in Baton Rouge, and that really got me into technology and the internet. And a buddy of mine and I in high school ended up running the bulletin board, the dial-up service. We had about 34 dial-up lines and a few thousand users. And I just fell in love with the internet and all things internet technology. Thought about not going to college. My dad convinced me to go. So I went to the school I always wanted to go to, Texas A&M, and joined the Corps Cadets. Was a Navy Marine midshipman for 4 years in the Corps Cadets there. Wore a uniform every day. Thought about commissioning. Like my father was in the Navy and grandfather was a naval officer, but they both encouraged me not to. Bill Clinton was president at the time. He wasn't really hiring. He was laying people off, which was an interesting time for the military. And so so I ended up interning with PricewaterhouseCoopers. I was getting a degree in accounting and was getting a master's in information systems. And I enjoyed the work at Pricewaterhouse, but it was insane travel. It was Sunday through Thursday every week, all year, and never see your family, and nowhere exciting. It was really a great group of people, but not a great work pattern. And so I started doing work on the side in my dorm room for some ex-cadet Aggies. If you don't know anything about Texas A&M, people say they have ferocious, loyal alumni networks, but they haven't seen A&M. Aggies are insane about other Aggies. We love taking care of each other. And so 8 former cadets, and we call them former students. You're never a former Aggie because you're always an Aggie. They hired me to write code for them as a student. I went to my dad and I said, "Hey, let's start a business. I've got some clients. I need some capital and I need a lot of advice." And so he wrote me a check for $5,000 and then said, "I'll be your bank if you need more." And I think we ended up needing about $68,000 to get the business off the ground. And which makes us unbelievably capital efficient. Right. But we started JV Knowledge in 2001. I went to one of my best friends. Now he's one of my best friends. At the time, we were just acquaintances. He went to high school with me at that engineering nerd high school. I call it like fame for nerds because it was really nerdy. And he was from Argentina and he was looking for a job. And so I hired him. And then 9/11 happened, like right after all this stuff, and so we had to figure things out, and work kind of dried up, and we chased work, and I got some work, and then he couldn't get a work visa to stay here because 9/11 they changed all the visa rules, and so he went back to his home country of Argentina and started an office there in 2002, and fast forward to today, we've got about 230 employees or so, more or less, I think plus or minus 2 or 3, about 230 people. And they're in US, Argentina, and South Africa. In 2006, we got super into construction through starting a product called SmartBid. We built SmartBid from the ground up to handle bidding needs. There was a really big need in the market because an existing player had been acquired and they had done a forcible migration to the new version and the customers were unhappy. And so we picked a lot of them up. And so by the end of 2017, we had about a dozen clients and things were really rocking and rolling with SmartBid. And we were still doing our custom software development that we'd always done. And we're still building websites. I've probably built 400 websites. It's something I really severely dislike doing, but it paid the bills. And we were bootstrapped. We didn't have any funding. And then we really built SmartBid up into quite a big thing. But by the time we sold it 2 years ago, we were processing all the bidding for about a third of all construction in North America. And we had a third of all the big contractors using it. We had people in Dubai and Hawaii and the UK and Hong Kong, all over Europe. We had bidding 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So I actually opened a customer service office over in Cape Town, South Africa, just to deal with all the support needs we had all over the world. And we really had a lot of fun. I learned a lot about construction. I ended up in 2007, because I've always done a good bit of public speaking, starting to speak in construction conferences. And I ended up speaking at about 400 of them. Started a podcast called The Content Crew, another podcast called The InsurTech Geek. We kept growing our insurance side of the business now. And today, full half of our business is insurance tech, outsourcing, software outsourcing for insurance companies. And the other half is our product group, which after selling SmartBid and Smart Insight, we beefed up our Smart Compliance product, started a new insurance claims product called TerraClaim, and then jumped into a management software program that we built called Smart Enterprise. And so we have those 3 products. We've got our outsourcing. We have a strategic consulting practice for construction companies. And we do a 6-city roadshow every year for construction companies to come geek out with us. The podcast is weekly. I still every once in a while dabble in code. I was doing a bunch of Node.js coding this past week on VS Code on my Mac. Ramping up Docker instances and kind of brushing off the old coding skills because I haven't coded in a while. Outside of that, I love to fly. I'm a pilot. I have about 750 hours of two planes, 2 Piper airplanes. And I fly them all over the country, do a lot of dog rescue flights and fly my family all over the place and fly to my speaking gigs. So I'm a super big flying geek too.
Yeah, I love watching the pictures that you post on LinkedIn of you and the dogs. Like you're in the plane and there's just this incredibly happy dog behind you.
I know. They're super grateful. Like dogs. I'm really into dogs, and we own 3, and then we foster probably 13 to 18 dogs a year.
Oh, wow.
And then I transport probably a good 10 to 20 a year, depending. Some years even more. I mean, I transported 11 dogs at one time because a lot of them were puppies. I went down and flew down and picked them up and took them to their next step. It's kind of like the underground railroad of dog rescue. We take them out of kill shelters and we bring them to homes where they can rehabilitate them and then get them adoptable. It's hilarious. I mean, it's a pretty small plane. They're little prop planes. I mean, I just jam. I take the seats out and I just jam. I safely, comfortably jam them in there with their crates. And
there's that joke in construction about herding cats. So having that many dogs in a plane, I mean, you've just prepared for this. Yeah, but you've been in construction working in the construction industry since about 2005, right?
Yeah, it's been about 15 years now.
Yeah. And so one of the things, because you and I have touched while working in the construction software space, one thing that's interesting about construction is that I don't want to use the term tech adverse, but it's a very slow adoption industry. Is that still the case?
It's hard to say now because there's been such a large uptick in digital acquisition as a result of COVID that I view coronavirus as the straw that broke the camel's back with construction because they didn't have a choice but to go digital in many cases. Mm-hmm. So it's interesting. I've noticed something because I've gotten to travel all over the world. I have offices in 3 continents and I've got clients in every continent except Antarctica, right? So, I mean, I've gotten to go all over the world. I've gotten to speak all over the world. And it's a weird thing. Almost every place I go, they believe that they're the worst. It's a weird, strange, self-deprecating mentality. Like every industry I've worked in, and I really 99% of my time is construction and insurance now. And there's a lot of overlap between construction and insurance, whether you know it or not. There's a ton. The surety business, builder's risk, and property casualty. I mean, they're just, it's really an amazing amount of overlap. That's why I work in both of them. It's a weird deal. Every industry says they're the worst and the slowest, except maybe the tech industry. Numerically speaking, though, construction really is truly the worst. When you look at in general, and I spent 6 years in public office. I was a city councilman in College Station, Texas. And my rule in politics was always to follow the money. If you wanted to figure out what was going on, always follow the money. And the same rule applies in construction. When you look at the money, and Gartner publishes a great study of cross-industry average of spending per dollar of revenue. And even comparing construction to other low-margin industries, because construction is not the only low-margin business out there. Transportation's a terribly low-margin business. Right. And construction is truly the worst at spending. We're about 1% of revenue. The cross-industry average is 3.5%. Banking, financial services is 5 to 6%. I mean, we are really the worst at spending, and your money is where your mouth is, right? And so there really is a big aversion to technology. I think largely because construction is the prototype building business, right? Every building's a prototype because it's never going to be built again, and unless they're prefab modular and then they're doing it right. But it's wild. There's so much risk. It's so difficult. There's so many variables that people just get locked up when they're trying to figure out if they should go digital, and they just fall back on what they already know.
Do you think that not just with COVID happening, but we found not just in different industries, but the deployment of it used to also be hard. Like, oh, I got to stand up these servers, and it just seems so complicated. Yeah. But now it's like, no, it's a cloud service. You just turn it on. We do these things. And so I think the barrier to entry maybe also makes them feel not as nervous to take it on than like you got to buy new boxes and data centers.
Yeah, well, I mean, look, I was an admin of an IBM RS-6000 server in 1995. I was a FreeBSD admin in 1996. I was a Windows NT admin. I've been through the gambit. I mean, I ran all of my own infrastructure for JV Knowledge. I wrote the code. It was, when you're in small business, you kind of wear every hat. I've worn all the hats, and it's really hard to manage infrastructure, scale the hardware, deal with bandwidth and network connectivity, deal with the application layer. Like you have 8 layers, right? The 8th layer is the human. Yeah. And now most of the hang up is in layer 8, right? It's the humans that hang up now, because networking is so easy now. It's so easy compared to what we had to do 20 years ago or 10 years ago. Servers. All right. The other day, I wanted to start playing with some new services Azure has, but I didn't want to mess with my corporate Azure instance. So I just went and had my personal account and just signed up, because Microsoft does like free Azure. And I signed up. I was able to, within 10 minutes, I was able to sign up for Azure, create intrusion. I was able to do all kinds of application insights, security settings, establish firewalls, create a network, spin up virtual servers, and start publishing Node.js applications. I mean, I'm talking like less than an hour. Yeah. And I'm not even that experienced in this anymore. I mean, so the barrier to entry is so low that there's no good excuse anymore. There used to be a really good excuse, but there's no good excuse anymore.
Well, it's funny that the three of us here, because it's something that Sean and I talk about all the time, which is, back in the day when you're doing, BBSs and we had to wire up, like who still remembers IRQ codes? Right?
Yep.
Like,
oh yeah.
You just plug in USB devices now. Now, like the barrier to entry to do it is not just easier to get access to those services, but just exposes it to so many more people.
Yeah, it's nutty.
But yeah, so much has changed, and the speed at which we can roll things out now is incredible. Do you think that might be the biggest impact in construction in the last 15 years that you've seen? What do you think really has changed the game so far?
Yeah, I mean, first off, mobile connectivity. So really good LTE connections everywhere. Mm-hmm. And what's coming, of course, 5G, if it does what it promises, will truly be transformative for a multi-site industry like construction. Starlink, what Elon Musk is rolling out, is going to be transformative, because you'll have satellite internet connectivity everywhere. I mean, there's some really crazy cool stuff coming down the pipe. And so I think mobile connectivity was a big deal. And then certainly mobile computing capacity. 2007, iPhone gets rolled out, Android gets rolled out around the same time, and then the iPad that people really said was, it's just a big phone. Of course, the iPad ended up being a game changer in construction. That was 2010. So you got a decade of tablets and 13 years of smartphones, and then the advent of LTE, and then, enhanced LTE, and then this BS marketing concept AT&T calls 5G evolution, and then actual real 5G. I mean, there's a lot of really cool stuff coming down the pipe that's a big game changer for construction. And then just the cost of getting into software has really come down. It used to be really pricey, and a lot of construction companies still believe that it's just going to be prohibitively expensive to get into using software, but it's really not anymore. PlanGrid had a huge impact, because you could go and start managing plans for a very, very small fee. Now, it got pretty expensive later on, and it didn't stop there. I mean, even with SmartBid, we were able to deliver a web-based platform when there were still DOS programs running bidding. I mean, it's still, at that time in 2007, BidFax was still really popular. And, so we were able to come in and deliver a web app and get them set up in a fraction of the time that the on-prem products were getting set up in. And now there's true cloud-based ERP systems, like Jonas Premier. Coins is their new OA platform, is cloud-based. Dexter and Cheney is all cloud-based. It's like you have some ERP systems that are truly cloud-based and truly web-enabled and have mobile apps. That there's just a lot of really cool things that have happened, and it's reduced the barriers to entry. It's made it a lot easier for people to sign up. I mean, it's it's pretty impressive.
Well, you mentioned the iPad. And there's a thing, I don't know if somebody's not in the construction industry, they're probably not aware of that acronym BIM, Building Information Management. And my dad was in construction when I was growing up and built the first interstate building. And I remember paper blueprints on the dinner table every night after dinner. And he'd be going over it with, the slide rule, literally a calculator and a mechanical pencil. And seeing when I came in working in construction software, it was, wow, look at how much has changed. And then at Microsoft Inspire, I was able to see the HoloLens in use with that, as well as the Service Hub. The mobile technology has been huge. And so do you think that's going to continue to be the big game change?
Well, it's hard to predict the future, right? Mm-hmm. I mean, it's hard to predict what's going to be that continues to change and move people's hearts and minds. Mobile connectivity is accelerating in speed at an exponential rate, which is exciting. Mm-hmm. Mobile computing capacity in general is still following Moore's law. So it's doubling every couple of years. It's to the point now, though, where you don't notice.
Right.
And that's the interesting thing that we're at. I mean, building information modeling is heavily dependent on local compute capacity. And there's some amazing players out there, like my buddy Buck Davis, who co-hosts every once in a while, has BIMbox, and he's putting together some insane workstations. My gaming workstation is a BIMbox. I mean, it's crazy. It's crazy. Like, that's why I play Call of Duty and go into Battle Royale on Call of Duty Modern Warfare is with a BIMbox, because the amount of compute and GPU capacity they have is crazy. But for your average computer, your average person that needs to use computing capacity and internet speeds are at the point where you really don't even notice the increases anymore as much. The big companies that made a big splash are now having to prove they can be profitable. So you may see more expensive software in the future. I'm not, really, like Procore is having to re-gear their whole IPO. They had to lay off almost 200 people.
I read about that.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's all about the market is demanding profitability. And right. Procore's losses have accelerated as they've grown, which is not good. And so they're having to curtail those losses. Well, there's going to be top end price pressure on their clients, and then there's going to be cost cutting. And so you're not going to see, it's similar cycles. To quote my second favorite sci-fi series, Battlestar Galactica, this has all happened before and this will all happen again. I've been through a few of these run up and run down cycles on technology where, prices get cheap, people start throwing free product out, people sign up, and then companies go bankrupt. The public markets don't want to IPO unprofitable companies, and then prices go up and free stuff goes away. And so it's kind of these cycles. So we'll see what the big movers are, but the problem right now for construction companies is there's almost an overabundance of choice on technology products. And then there's still continued fragmentation of where their data lives and what it does.
Earlier, you were talking about the fact that everything you built was on the Microsoft stack. And the problem when you have that overabundance of choice, and I think you and I had this conversation at one of the expos about point solutions versus all-in-one solutions. And point solutions are really good at doing a specific thing, but getting them all to tie together introduces just a lot of complexity, a lot of risk, cybersecurity problems, and just interoperability problems.
Yeah, exactly. Yep. Yeah. And there's still I tried in the early days with COSA, and now the Construction Progress Coalition is trying to make efforts in standardization. But the reality is that, a bunch of independently owned software companies, they do what's most profitable every day. And that's not always building standardized APIs with fully exposed APIs so everybody can get all their data. And there's a lot of conflicting interests too. Some people that build software products still have a walled garden theory that they're gonna not work with or integrate with other companies, Yeah,
that's not a real surviving bet.
No, it's not. And look, I think the easiest one to look at is Microsoft. I mean, Satya Nadella is a genius. I love, as a CEO, I love him.
Yeah.
I like him a hell of a lot more than Ballmer. It was super disappointing having a sales guy run Microsoft. You know what I mean?
Developers.
Yes. his most famous thing. Yeah. He just didn't have it. And Nadella, the fact that I have VS Code running for free on my Mac and that I'm able to deploy to Azure from my Mac and .NET is supported on a Mac and on Unix is really amazing. And that Microsoft has embraced open source. That just shows you if Microsoft has abandoned walled garden, then everybody else needs to as well. Because it's like, seriously, like they had more cash. They're the most profitable company on the planet. You know, Apple came along with a walled garden, but even Apple has had to really open up a little bit and rethink a lot of their long held stances. And so it's been interesting. We'll see what happens in construction. If what I think it's all cyclical anyway. So I think we'll see cycles of it.
Yeah, I love that you talked about connectivity and then mobile compute power, because I've heard you talk about drones, augmented reality, digital twins. I really thought it was going to be something like that, but I think it does. It comes down to the fundamentals.
Yeah, and we're sitting at a convergence of fundamentals right now, right? So a lot of really good software has been written, and a lot of really good hardware has been manufactured, and a lot of really good internet connectivity has been put in place. And it's converged, and the consumer market and technology has just exploded. And now people have an expectation that their business products will be as connected and as good and as portable and as usable as their personal products. And so we're sitting at this nexus where they've all intersected. Before, like we actually had arguments about client server versus mainframe versus fat client versus thin client. And now all of those discussions are completely irrelevant because a gig of data is less than a penny to store. And so you can have terabytes of local storage. You can have teraflops of local compute. You can have, exabytes of cloud computing and storage. You can have exaflops of cloud computing, like all of these giant numbers, and they exist on both the local machine, on the off-prem machine, and the pipe between them. So like all of those discussions are irrelevant. Now what's relevant is how do we use all of those simultaneously to deliver the best experience to the customer? And then no one's thinking about that. Like I said this recently, if you're still having conversations about storage space or your mailbox size, you're like 8 years ago.
Oh, yeah.
Like that's like, those are not conversations that executives should even have. Like you shouldn't even think about it. Like I use Office 365 and SharePoint and Teams and run Azure for all of our infrastructure. I don't think about how much disk space I have anymore. And that used to be a common topic at our leadership team. And so like, you shouldn't think about these things. You should think about what applications do we need to use and what problems are those going to solve and how those make us more profitable. Yeah, exactly.
That's it. Yep. The big picture. Thank you so much for joining us. And I hope to have you on again and get maybe even deeper in these
anytime.
topics. James, one last question. How can people find you?
Yeah, sure. So if you want to look at the company, JB Knowledge is at jbknowledge.com. We do software development. We have products. We do consulting all around technology, largely around construction and insurance. And if you want more about me, it's jamesbenham.com. That has a little ebook you can download about 5 things they didn't teach you in college about entrepreneurship. I have a book coming. It's not in the next few months, only because COVID kind of threw off my editing cycle. It's already written, but we're in editing. And you can check that out there. Our speaking topics are on jamesbenham.com. And then the podcast, you want to listen to those. It's the Content Crew podcast. It's thecontentcrew.com. My insurance podcast is insurtechgeek.com. So you can check out Insurtech Geek, Content Crew, and you can come check us out at a roadshow in late 21. We had to bump the whole 2020 roadshow to 2021. But that's how you can find me, and I'd love to engage with you. Of course, my email is james@jbknowledge.com. You can just shoot me an email and we can start a convo.
Excellent. Thank you again, James, and have a great week.
James, hey man, I really appreciate good talking to you. I'd love to talk to you some more on the tech stuff because all the dev stuff, that's fun stuff we like to do too. So you catch us another time.
Absolutely. Thanks, man.
Holy smokes, here comes some really bad tech jokes.
All right, Conrad, tell me a joke.
Your face.
Oh, ouch. Does your face hurt? That's killing me.
No, actually, I'm not sure I really have a joke. We're doing so much on the security side, and we're doing a lot of MFA. But even when I do MFA, it really still requires me to put the password in. So, I try to use one, beef stew wouldn't work. It's not stroganoff.
Ew.
Yeah. Yeah.
Oh man.
I tried it. I took it a long way around. Tried to make it my own.
Yeah, I've been working pretty hard myself. And so, with this social distancing, I don't get to see my friends. And we've started an online band. Guess what we're called?
What?
1,023 megabytes. We don't have a gig just yet. All right. I finally told a joke that you didn't laugh at all.
We said 1,023 megabytes. I was like, and then I was like, why is that significant? And then you said the punchline. I was like, son of a gun.
I really thought that you thought that I had blown the joke.
I did for a second. I was like trying to, what is that? What,
no, it's 1,024 megabytes. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening to the Clearly Cloud podcast. Once again, I'm host one, Sean Spicer. Conrad Agremont is our other host here. Thank you very much for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Somewhere out in cyberspace.